Hello, this is Josh Findlay, Director of the Election Protection Project, and this is the Election Protection Podcast, where we talk all things election integrity. We're joined today by Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. Senator Blackburn has been a champion of election integrity. And Senator Blackburn, we're going to dive into some of the hot topics in election integrity today. But before we do, I'd love to know, where do you think we are with election integrity in 2024 compared to years past? You have a very unique vantage point, and I'd love to get your thoughts as we start out here.
Yes, indeed. And of course, Josh, as you know, in Tennessee, we've been ranked at the top of the list for election security, and Tennesseans really treasure that. I do think that as people have looked at what we've done in Tennessee and as they have reviewed what has happened in their states, that you have seen states clean up their voter rolls. People who are no longer living have been removed. People that have moved out of state have been removed from those voter rolls. There are states that are requiring ID. And all of this is a positive. And the good thing, too, is, as I like to say, in our founding documents, people, when the word people is used, it is capitalized as a proper noun. And this is an area where we, the people, have truly been the people and have stepped forward in county after county and have called on their election registrars to make certain that there is going to be safety, security, and integrity that will be followed at the ballot box.
Well, you bring up such a good point. I think the issue of this election cycle is going to be the voter rolls and who's allowed to vote. I mean, we've heard a lot of talk about non-citizen voting, and we're going to talk a little bit about the piece of legislation that you just introduced that has something to do with that. But before we dive into that, tell us the state of Congress right now, the Senate. What are the thoughts on non-citizen voting? How big of an issue is this for the 2024 election cycle?
Well, of course, in the Senate and in the House, there is legislation called the SAVE Act, which would require people to actually prove that they're a U.S. citizen in order to vote in a federal election. We think that's appropriate because when you look at the constitutional intent, when you look at legislative intent, the assumption is that only a citizen will be voting in our elections. What we have learned is that some states, like Minnesota, that have given driver's licenses to individuals who are in the country illegally, then when they move to a new state, they try to change that driver's license and at the same time register to vote. That is through the motor voter registration law. And it is appropriate that those questionable registrations be reviewed and that we know that individuals are going to be who they claim to be and that they are a U.S. citizen.
We've seen several states, the Secretary of State, take measures to remove non-citizens from their voting rolls. And there was a story that came out in Oregon about just that kind of thing happening, right? They talked about two joint bills that allowed non-citizens to get on the voter rolls. It was that motor voter and then the ability to get a driver's license without showing documentation. We've seen a lot of support from the SAVE Act all the way from the president, former president of the United States on down. What are the odds that we see some sort of action on the SAVE Act anytime soon?
Our hope is that the House is going to send a continuing resolution, a funding bill, and that the SAVE Act will be attached to it. Now, they have one shot at this, so we are hopeful that the SAVE Act is going to be the lead piece on this, and the funding to keep the government open so it does not go into a shutdown will be attached to that. They will travel together and come from the House to the Senate. My understanding is that Speaker Johnson is going to push that bill forward this week, and we hope that it will come over to the Senate.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think we're all hopeful for that. Senator Blackburn, tell us about the Equal Representation Act, a bill that you just introduced that it has to do a little bit with non-citizen voting. Like we said, the hot topic of this election cycle.
That's exactly right. This legislation, Senator Haggerty and I have worked on this because we became aware that what was happening in some of these sanctuary states and sanctuary cities, areas like California and some of the cities there where they have lost seats in the U.S. House. What they were doing was counting people that are in the country illegally in their apportionment numbers. And what this legislation would do would say only citizens are counted in those apportionment numbers. You can't count tourists, you can't count people on visas, you can't count people that are in the country illegally. It would require you to count citizens as you look at apportionment. This is important because under the Biden-Harris administration, you have had 11 million people enter the country illegally. And that is a population larger than most of our states. So it is important, so vitally important, that we say, no, 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 you cannot count these individuals that are here in the country illegally as you are looking at apportionment and how that applies to the U.S. House of Representatives.
And Senator Blackburn, what is the hopeful effect of this legislation on congressional districts, for example?
Yes, what it would do is allow states like Tennessee, that is a growing state and is on the cusp of getting another congressional seat, to be able to do that. But right now, basically, you have states where people are exiting those states. You've got states like Washington and Oregon and California and Illinois and New York that are losing population. Therefore, they are losing representation. And this should be a true picture of where people are choosing to live in this country. And therefore, citizens should be the ones that are counted in these numbers. And these states that are sanctuary states that are taking in individuals that are in the country illegally ought not to be able to count those numbers in their apportionment numbers.
No, that's exactly right. There was a Babylon Bee kind of joke a while ago about Gavin Newsom being the U-Haul salesman of the year. And then it turned out the fact was U-Haul actually ran out of trucks in California because people were leaving so fast. And it sounds like your legislation is going to prevent states from propping up their population with illegal immigrants as people flee due to their bad policies.
That's right. That's exactly right. And you look at states like Nevada, Colorado, where people have fled California, or Montana and Idaho, where people have fled those West Coast states. And you know that their numbers are going to change, and apportionment should be fair, and it should represent the citizens of the country.
Senator Blackburn, that sounds like a good piece of legislation, something we all need to get behind. I want to switch gears for a minute away from non-citizen voting and talk about influence in our elections. One thing that everybody seems to talk about this time of the year is foreign influence in our elections. Russian influence, Chinese influence. There were some quotes from Hillary Clinton the other day bringing back, again, talk about Russian influence from the 2016 election. From your vantage point, what do you think the risks are of foreign influence in this election?
And we know that foreign entities have always tried to influence our elections. This is just, they've always been up to this. Now what they are doing is using social media, and people are more aware of this. What we want to make certain is that this is rooted out. And it means these social media platforms need to be doing their job in looking for these entities that are out of the U.S. that are posting or misrepresenting. And so it is going to be important that social media look for these bad actors that are coming online. One thing we do know is they are absolutely at the top of the list when it comes to disinformation. You look at how they utilize TikTok, and as we know, TikTok is not about funny cat videos. TikTok is really soft propaganda for the Chinese Communist Party, and much of it, that's the way they use it to push their propaganda. You also look at how they use Confucius institutes and Confucius classrooms as a part of this soft propaganda or influence, as they call it, as they try to change the mind of the American people and how they think toward the Chinese Communist Party.
We're all on social media. Can you give us an example of what this might look like for our viewers that may not be aware?
What they may see is videos on TikTok that are glorifying the Chinese Communist Party's positions or their culture, or videos that are saying don't eliminate TikTok, supporting TikTok, or videos that are glorifying the trade and the manufacturing and trade that is done in China and the goods that get shipped here to the U.S. You will also see them blame the U.S. for the supply chain issues. They will blame the U.S. For their support of Taiwan. And of course, we have dealt with this, and the way the Chinese Communist Party has gone on social media attacking me. Now, you may see other individuals that are members of the House and the Senate that the Chinese Communist Party has sanctioned or banned, and they will go after them and misrepresent their positions.
So how have they gone after you? I'm curious about that.
Oh, it's, they're just constantly sanctioning or banning, because I am a supporter of Taiwan. I believe that we should require China to meet the quotas that they have put in place, that were put in place under the Trump administration for the purchase of ag products that are so important to our Tennessee farmers. So they're always going to be fighting back against people who oppose them. I know that the Chinese Communist Party's goal is to be globally dominant by the time we get to the midpoint of this century. They plan to be the superpower by the time we get to 2050. I believe in the greatness of the United States of America. And when I need to call out China and their other axis of evil friends, Russia, Iran, North Korea, I will do it, because I want our nation to continue to be that beacon of freedom. I want us to be militarily strong, and I want us to protect our freedoms and pass them on to the next generation, to my children and my grandchildren, so that they can enjoy those freedoms and can know what it is to live their version of the American dream. But it means we have to get to work on calling this out.
Well, we thank you for your bravery on that, Senator Blackburn.
Sure.
We really appreciate that. So what is the role of social media? How should they prevent this Chinese influence on our elections? I mean, we know other countries are going to try to do it. What should be the role of social media in this?
Well, and one of the things there is, what is the role of the citizen? And the citizen being educated on what actually is happening, what is actually taking place. That is going to be the best place to start. The other thing is social media platforms, when they know they have a bad actor on their platform, then they need to be diligent in watching for that and not allowing those bad actors that are outside the United States, some of these Chinese bad actors, Russian bad actors, to be there on those platforms.
Senator Blackburn, thank you for your time. We've got one last question. What are your predictions for 2024 regarding election integrity? Not who's going to win, but what can we expect from this upcoming election?
I think that this is an area, as I said earlier, where we the people are taking charge. And I have talked to so many people who have said they've gotten engaged. They want to make certain that elections are safe and secure and that we preserve one person, one vote in the United States. And because of that, I do believe you're going to see people work diligently to make that happen in their precinct, in their community, in their county, and in their state.
Senator Blackburn, thank you for joining us.
You got it.
This is Josh Findlay with the Election Protection Project, and this is the Election Protection Podcast.